The first time I saw a man die, he wasn't begging. He wasn't screaming either. He was just thirsty. We were standing in a dry patch of land on the outskirts of Sabinas, Tamaulipas. The moon hung like a dull blade above our heads, and the air smelled of burned trash and old gasoline. A circle of trucks had their engines running headlights slicing through the dust. In the center of that ring knelt a man, hands tied behind his back, his face swollen and split open from beatings. He looked up, not with hate, not even with fear, just exhaustion. "Agua," he whispered. One of the sicarios holding him pulled out a bottle. He offered it slowly, like a cruel trick, letting the man lean forward. And then, just as the mouth opened and hope flickered in those broken eyes, the shot rang out. A single bullet to the forehead. The body dropped like it had been waiting to fall. Blood pooled under him, black under the moonlight. Someone lit a match. The smell of gasoline thickened. And then, the fire. No one flinched. No one prayed. Because in the world I belonged to, then death was a language we all spoke. I was 17, and I was already dying inside. They say people join the cartel because they're starving. That's not true. Not for me. I didn't come from nothing. My family wasn't rich, but I had food, a roof, clean clothes. What I didn't have was shine. That glow people carry when they've got power in their hands and fear in their shadow. In my neighborhood, that shine came in the form of brand new trucks, gold chains, women who laughed too loud and leaned into tinted windows. They drove through the barrio like gods, leaving the rest of us in the dust, on bikes with busted sneakers and empty pockets. One afternoon, I saw a guy from the block roll up in a black Ranger, gleaming in the sun like a panther. He had gold on his wrist, a grin like a secret, and the kind of eyes that made you stand still. He leaned down to me, said 6 words that I didn't understand fully, but felt like a door cracking open. The ones who see, find the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. I imagined myself behind that windshield, feeling the weight of a gun on my thigh, and the world watching me for once. I wanted that power not to hurt people, not yet. I just didn't want to be invisible anymore. They say everyone has a moment when they cross the line. Mine was in that circle of trucks watching blood soak into the dirt. That execution wasn't about punishment. It was about teaching. The silence afterward was louder than the gunshot. It told us, make a mistake. Hesitate, show weakness, and this will be your end. I didn't cry. I didn't blink. I swallowed the fear like a mouthful of broken glass and stayed quiet. That was the test. And I passed. The commander walked past us slowly, letting his boots sink into the dirt. He looked me in the eyes close enough that I smelled tobacco and sweat. Then he nodded. Just a slight nod. But I knew what it meant. From that moment on, my life was no longer mine. I thought I had found power. What I had really found was the first chain. And I didn't know it yet, but the map I would soon come to serve, El Mapa Rojo, was not a tool of strategy. It was a machine of death. And I was about to become one of its eyes. You think you know who runs Tamaulipas? Let me tell you who really draws the bloodlines. I grew up in a neighborhood where dreams came in 2 sizes, small enough to fit in your pocket or large enough to get you killed. We were not starving, not like the stories you see on the news. We had beans, tortillas, shoes without holes most of the time. My mother worked in a bakery. My father disappeared before I could memorize his voice. We made it work. But that kind of life, the one where survival is enough, was never enough for me. Not when I looked around and saw what power looked like. It drove past us every night in armored trucks with tinted windows and custom rims. It wore watches that flashed like mirrors and rings the size of baby fists. It made the girls at the bus stop smile in ways they never smiled at me. Power in my world was loud and flashy and respected, and I was a shadow in its path. The school system tried to save me. I was decent in class, especially in math. A teacher once told me I had potential like it was a rare flower that needed protection. But potential means nothing when every billboard, every song, every whispered conversation tells you that respect is faster when you take it. Football games, Sunday meals, chores at home. None of it compared to the feeling I got when a black SUV rolled by and I caught a glimpse of the driver holding a gold-plated pistol in one hand and a cigarette in the other. That was the kind of image that stuck. That was the world I wanted to belong to. I still remember the exact afternoon it began. The sun was brutal, and we were killing time on the corner, sweating through cheap t-shirts, tossing jokes that no one really laughed at. That was when the Ranger appeared. Black as sin. Clean as death. The man who stepped out was barely older than us, but he walked like he owned gravity. Gold chain, low cap, a calm stare that made you want to lower your eyes. He greeted us like we were old friends, but he only looked at me. The one who knows how to see, he said, always finds the door. That was all. No threats, no promises, just a sentence that cracked something open in me. That night my heart wouldn't stop racing. I lay in bed listening to the fan squeak, staring at the ceiling like it might offer answers. What did he see in me? Was it ambition, desperation, or just a kid too proud to stay invisible? Whatever it was, the next few days felt like waiting for a thunderstorm that never came. I walked the streets hoping to run into him again, memorizing the sound of engines, the shape of shadows, trying to convince myself that I was already changing. Then one night, the call came. Not a phone call, a sign. The same Ranger rolled by slower this time. It stopped just long enough for the window to lower. A nod, nothing more. But I understood. I left my bike behind, told my mother I was sleeping at a friend's house, and walked out with my heart pounding like a war drum. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't say goodbye. Deep down, I knew I might not come back. But I wanted it. I wanted the shine, the danger, the weight of a new identity. The meeting spot was an abandoned basketball court, lit only by flickering street lamps and the headlights of 3 trucks. Men got out, tatted, armed, silent. I stood still, waiting. Then he appeared, the same guy with the same gold chain and the same smile that said everything and nothing at once. He put a hand on my shoulder and said, "If you really have what it takes to stop being a nobody, tonight's the night." My legs trembled, my stomach twisted, but I nodded. And just like that, I climbed into the back of a truck and watched my old life vanish in the rearview mirror. The truck smelled like old leather sweat and burned tobacco. I sat in the back between 2 guys who didn't say a word the entire ride. Their faces were stone, their eyes unreadable. One of them flicked a lighter over and over, the only sound besides the engine and the crunch of gravel beneath the tires. We left behind the city lights within minutes. The neighborhood faded in the mirrors street by street until all I could see was dark countryside and shadows shaped like regrets. I had no idea where we were going, and I didn't ask. That I would learn quickly was rule number 1: silence was survival. After almost an hour, we turned off the road and into a patch of land that looked forgotten by God. Matorrales surrounded a crooked shack made of sheet metal and rust. The trucks formed a semicircle, engines, still running lights aimed directly at the center. They pulled us out and lined us up, 5 of us, all young, all trying to look brave but failing. My heartbeat wasn't in my chest anymore. It was everywhere: my ears, my throat, the soles of my feet. I kept my mouth shut. A man stepped forward with a rifle slung across his chest. He looked like a teacher taking roll call, except his eyes made it clear this wasn't school, and the price for getting an answer wrong was death. He asked our names. One by one we gave them. He didn't write anything down. He just nodded like he was carving each one into memory. Then another man, bigger, angrier, walked behind us and said something I'll never forget. Tonight, we see who's useful. There's no space for cowards. Every word felt like lead in my stomach. The silence afterward was thick. One of the guys next to me, just a skinny kid with acne and eyes too wide, started shaking. He muttered something under his breath. Then he dropped to his knees and started begging. I didn't even hear the gun cock. Just a single clean shot. His body collapsed beside me. Blood splattered across the dirt. No one reacted. That was the lesson. You plead, you die faster. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I felt warm liquid down my leg, and I couldn't tell if it was blood or piss. I stared straight ahead. A third man stepped up, face scarred, teeth yellow from years of smoking. He walked up to me until our noses almost touched. His breath reeked of tobacco and stale beer. He stared into my eyes like he was searching for fear. He found it. But I didn't blink. I held the look, clenched my jaw, did everything I could not to shake. Then slowly, he smiled, not kind, not friendly, just satisfied. He walked away. I had passed. They shoved us into another truck, quieter this time. No one spoke. The road ahead was rough, full of potholes and loose stones. Every bump reminded me that I wasn't going back. I was being delivered to something darker, to someone who would own me. When we finally stopped, the place looked worse than the last. A windowless concrete house with a single light bulb flickering above a rusted door. They brought us in, lined us up again, this time in front of a long table. On it were radios, notebooks, and a folded tarp that covered something I didn't want to guess. One of the men lit a cigarette, then spoke with the kind of calm that feels more threatening than yelling. From now on, your mouths are our cameras. What you say can keep men alive, or send them to hell. As he spoke, another man tapped the floor with the butt of his rifle, each thud marking a beat like a ritual. That night, I learned the language of the cartel. I learned what it meant to see, but not speak, to listen, but never ask. That was my real baptism, not in water, in fear. They gave us our first radios that night, black Nextels, with fresh batteries and antennas wrapped in black tape. Alongside them, a pocket-sized notebook and a pencil so short it looked like it had survived a dozen lives before mine. No explanation, no ceremony. Just these 3 items, laid out like sacred tools. One of the commanders lit a cigarette and exhaled smoke across the room, then leaned against the wall and said, "This is your weapon now. What you say into that box decides who lives and who gets buried." He wasn't being dramatic. He was being precise. He explained that being a Halcón wasn't just about watching. It was about hearing everything. The distant roar of engines, the stutter of gunfire miles away, the pattern of sirens, how to tell the difference between municipal, federal, and military patrols just by sound. He said our job was to become shadows, invisible, but everywhere, seeing what no one else noticed. And if we failed even once, we wouldn't just die. Our families would too. I remember him saying it without raising his voice, like he was reminding us to put on sunscreen or buckle our seatbelts. That was rule number 2. Fear doesn't need volume to be loud. Another man, bigger, with a shaved head and a scar down his cheek, paced behind us, with a rifle slamming its butt against the concrete floor every time the commander finished a sentence, like a metronome of terror. One of the other new recruits raised his hand to ask a question. The scarred man didn't say anything. He just walked over and slammed the rifle stock into the kid's face. Blood hit the floor before the boy did. That was rule number 3. Questions are for people who still believe they have choices. They taught us the codes. Simple words, innocent sounding, but each one held the weight of death. Luz verde meant everything was clean. Sol rojo meant execution confirmed. Sombra amarilla signaled suspicious movement or someone who owed a quota. Sombra azul meant federales in disguise. Viento norte was a rival convoy. We had to learn them fast without hesitation and say them in under 5 seconds. Because if the army caught the frequency, they'd triangulate and find us. And if we froze up on the line even for a second, they'd assume we were compromised, and someone else would finish our sentence with a bullet. They drilled us like soldiers. We recited codes over and over while they stared into our faces to see who flinched, who forgot, who lied. One veteran kept saying, "These aren't just words, they're bullets. And every time you speak, someone somewhere is loading a gun." The more I repeated them, the more I felt something in me harden, like my voice was no longer mine, like I had become an extension of the radio. After hours of practice, they turned on the real network. Static filled the room. Then voices. Halcones from different sectors, checking in, calling out plate numbers, patrol movements, migrant groups. It was fast, like a current, like blood rushing through the veins of a monster. The commander leaned over to me and said, "This is the true power of the cartel. Not the guns, not the drugs. It's this control of information. He who sees first, kills first." On the wall behind him were photographs, not of enemies, of Halcones, young, hollow-eyed, dead. "They made mistakes," he said, pointing to one. He confused Viento Norte with Sombra Amarilla. A whole convoy slipped away. He disappeared 2 hours later. The others nodded like it was routine, like losing your life over a single word was just another part of the job. That was rule number 4, your voice is your life. Misuse it and you die before the echo fades. They brought us into the room like it was a classroom, but the only subject on the table was death. A black tarp was pulled away, and underneath lay a giant map of Tamaulipas, laminated taped to the wood like it was sacred. It wasn't folded or rolled. It was spread flat like a body on an autopsy table. Cities were marked in colors that at first looked festive green, yellow, red, but the commander didn't smile. He stood over the map with a pointer and said, "This is the heart of the operation, and your eyes will feed it." He tapped a green zone. Safe, fully controlled. He moved to yellow, under negotiation. Anyone who refuses to pay, mark them. Then he hovered over red. War. No more talking. Blood has already been promised here. The room was silent, except for the buzz of the overhead bulb. I stared at the map, realizing each color wasn't a strategy, it was a sentence. He handed me the laser pointer and told me to mark the neighborhoods I knew. I hesitated, not because I didn't know them, but because I recognized one. It was 4 streets away from my mother's house. I raised the pointer and circled it. The commander nodded without looking at me. "Hot zone," he said. "Activity incoming." My stomach dropped. I knew then that whatever happened there, whoever died, might be someone I once knew, maybe even someone I loved. They started assigning us zones to monitor based on proximity and familiarity. I got a cluster of streets that included bus stops, street vendors, and a known migrant route. The rules were simple: scan the area report every hour and react instantly to change. Every green zone required confirmation. Every yellow zone meant pressure collecting, intimidating, reminding them that silence was not free. And the red meant you watched someone die. The commander circled one red zone with a marker, looked up and said, "Someone will fall here tonight. It's already decided." His voice didn't carry emotion, just fact, like he was reading a weather forecast. The room full of Halcóns absorbed it without reaction. That's when I realized how far gone they all were, or maybe how far gone I already was. That night, my orders were to stand outside a busy market. Meat vendors, fruit stalls, families shopping for dinner. My job was to identify which store hadn't paid their fee, to track who entered, who left, and who looked brave enough to resist. I wore a hoodie, leaned against a wall, and whispered plate numbers into my radio like I was reading groceries off a list. Then 2 trucks rolled in, lights off. I knew it was more than collection. My heart started racing. One of the men, face covered, made eye contact with me and gave a short nod. I followed. We entered a butcher's shop that smelled of blood and cold air. The man behind the counter crossed his arms as they asked about the debt. He said the business barely fed his family. His voice was calm, but I could feel death creeping into the room like smoke. One of the sicarios whispered, "Yellow becomes red." Then they dragged him toward the hooks, where hours earlier pig carcasses had hung. They lifted him like he was weightless. I watched metal pierce his skin. I watched him hang. And I said nothing. The man turned to me and said, "Report it." My fingers shook as I lifted the radio. Zone adjusted. Yellow confirmed. That was the code. The code for death disguised as a transaction. We walked out, left his body swinging in silence, and by the time I got back to the house, his zone on the map had already deepened in color. That was the rule: every kill strengthened the color. Every silence made it official. And I, without lifting a weapon, had become part of the kill. The night we met him, the radios went silent before he even stepped through the door. No chatter, no static, just a dead frequency like the air itself was holding its breath. They told us to leave our phones in a metal box and sit still. We obeyed. No one asked who we were waiting for. We already knew. The air smelled of mildew and stress. Curtains covered the windows. The only light came from a bare bulb above the map. I stared at it, at the thick red zones that had spread like a virus, and I felt something crawl under my skin. That map had teeth, and tonight we would meet the man who commanded its bite. He entered quietly, with no entourage, no fanfare. He wore plain-clothes jeans, a jacket, nothing flashy, but his presence crushed the room like a closed fist. Everyone stood. Everyone bowed their heads. I did too, though my eyes flicked up for a moment. I caught his face. Sharp features, heavy brow, eyes that seemed to measure sin. He looked at each of us slowly, like he was reading our thoughts one by one. Then he spoke, calm, flat, final. "The map must stay clean. Every report you give is a bullet I pull. Do not miss." That was El Huevo, Juan Gerardo Trevino, the man who turned Tamaulipas into a chessboard soaked in blood. As he spoke, his lieutenant unfolded the latest version of the map across the table. Colored pins sparkled under the light like deadly ornaments. He pointed to a red zone near Anahuac and asked who had sent the last coordinates. I felt the air freeze. It had been me. My report had helped avoid a patrol and saved a convoy. I raised my hand. His eyes locked onto mine. He did not smile, not really. Just a curl at the edge of his mouth, like approval carved from stone. Good. That report saved product. Keep seeing before the others do. He did not thank me. He branded me. From that moment on, I knew he remembered voices. He remembered patterns. And now he remembered mine. He reviewed other sectors, corrected mistakes, in silence moved pins from yellow to red without blinking. A small gesture, a flick of a finger, and somewhere someone's fate was sealed. No orders shouted, no threats needed. He spoke with the confidence of a man who knew no one in the room would ever defy him. At one point, He stopped over a green zone and tapped it. The fear is fading there. I want noise. The word sat heavy. Noise meant gunshots. Bodies. A message written in blood. He did not give dates. He gave intent. He turned to us again and said that if any of us failed to report, or worse reported wrong, our entire bloodline would pay. That was his word, not just family bloodline, like he would reach backward and forward in time to erase anyone who shared our DNA. I believed him. Everyone did. That night, I walked out of the safe house drenched in sweat that had nothing to do with heat. My hands were trembling, but my face stayed calm. I had learned how to hide fear. El Huevo's final words echoed in my mind like a siren. The map marks homes, not just streets. It was a sentence that tied our work directly to the people we loved. A reminder that loyalty was not a choice, it was a leash. One tug and everything we cared for would vanish. We had not sworn loyalty with a handshake or a contract. We had sworn it with silence, with obedience, with reports whispered into radios that would cross the room, reach the ear of a man we barely knew, and decide who got to see the sun the next day. I used to think yellow was the color of warning, something that gave people time to change direction, to pay up, to back away before things got violent. But inside the map, yellow meant something else. It meant pressure. It meant fear calibrated just enough to break a man's will, but not yet spill his blood. Unless, of course, he resisted. Then, yellow became red, and fast. One afternoon, I was sent to monitor a public market in the center of town. A place packed with noise, with the smell of raw meat sweat and overripe fruit. I posed as just another face leaning against a lamppost hoodie, up notebook, hidden radio tucked into my waistband. My orders were simple: identify who was falling behind on payments, take note of license plates, and report any strange movement. I thought I would just be watching. That was my first mistake. 2 trucks rolled up just after sunset. No lights, no plates. The men who stepped out wore masks and moved like they had done this too many times to care. One of them gave me a nod, not a greeting, a signal. Follow. We entered a small butcher's shop on the corner. It smelled of iron and cold blood. The man behind the counter was maybe 50, hard lines on his face, dirt under his nails. He looked tired, not scared. That would be his mistake. The sicarios told him he was late, that the quota had gone unpaid for 2 weeks. He didn't shout or beg. He simply said the business was dying, that his family needed to eat too. His voice didn't shake. That was enough. The man standing beside me leaned in and whispered, "The yellow turns red now." Then they dragged him out from behind the counter. The butcher didn't fight. He just stood, tall arms out, as if ready for whatever came next. They lifted him onto a meat hook, still slick with blood. I heard the metal tear through his shoulder, heard his breath catch in his throat. I didn't move, didn't blink. One of them turned to me. "Report it." I pulled out the radio and said the words I had been trained to use. Zone adjusted. Yellow confirmed. That was code. Code for death. Code for payment enforced. The phrase sounded like a receipt, like an invoice being settled. I hated how easily it came out. We left the body hanging there, visible from the street. Customers outside stood, frozen eyes wide, but lips sealed. No one screamed. No one ran. That was the power of yellow. It bled into the pavement and taught lessons without lectures. Fear did the talking. Back at the house, I watched the commander update the map. He ran a red marker over the zone, deepening its hue. Each death, he said, strengthens control. The more they see, the less they ask. I realized then that the color yellow was not a warning. It was a promise, a quiet deal, pay or die. No middle ground, no delays. And when someone crossed the line, we did not erase them. We absorbed them into the map, into the color, into the system. From that day forward, I could no longer walk through a market without hearing the sound of metal hooks. The smell of meat always reminded me of that shop, of the man who stood tall and was still hung like a carcass. I had not killed him, but my report had sealed it. I understood then that the yellow was not less cruel than the red. It was simply more patient. And now, whenever I saw a yellow zone glow on the map, I knew someone had already been chosen. They just did not know it yet. They called them Casas Seguras safe houses, but there was nothing safe about them. They were more like nodes in a living organism pulsing with paranoia and radio static. Each one was different. A small apartment above a bakery, an abandoned finca in the outskirts, a room behind a car wash that always smelled like burnt oil. No signs, no addresses, just a mattress on the floor, yellow light bulbs and radios that never stopped whispering. Every few weeks, they moved us. No warnings, no explanations. One night you were in Nuevo Laredo, the next you woke up in Reynosa or Sabinas with a new handler, new codes, and new rules. We were ghosts trapped in a circuit designed to erase memory and identity. The excuse was always the same: security. We were told the rotations were meant to throw off rivals, confuse the army, protect the operation. But I started to understand it differently. It wasn't just to disorient the enemy. It was to disorient us. Keep us off balance. Prevent us from building roots or trust or escape plans. Each house had a different system, different camera angles, different passwords, different punishment routines. You learned fast, or you disappeared. That was the rule. In one of those houses, I was placed just 3 blocks away from an elementary school. Every morning, I could hear the laughter of children through the thin walls as I sat inside cataloging patrol routes, recording plate numbers, measuring shadows. It was the sound of life against the silence of the dead, a noise I was no longer part of. That contrast cut me deeper than any threat ever could. One night, I heard a distress call on the radio. A Halcón had missed a report about a convoy of Marines entering a zone. His voice cracked as he tried to explain. The signal went dead mid-sentence. A few hours later, I heard the same zone marked red. No follow-up, no ceremony, just a shift in color, a disappearance. That was how we were reminded the only safe thing was silence, and even that had an expiration date. The longer I stayed, the more I realized that none of us mattered. We were replaceable, interchangeable, a voice with a code, a coordinate in motion. We couldn't trust each other. We couldn't even trust ourselves. Every error, every hesitation, every whisper could be the last. And yet, we kept reporting, kept feeding the map, kept living like insects under glass. One night, the commander read a list of names aloud, Halcones who had failed. 2 of them were kids I had spoken to just days earlier. One had lent me a battery. The other had shared part of his dinner. By morning, they were gone. Nothing left but an empty mattress and the sound of the radio switching frequencies. No one asked. No one cried. We all just turned the page. I started to wonder if El Huevo even knew our names, or if we were just numbers on his board. But then I remembered his eyes, the way they scanned the room, the way he remembered who sent which report. I realized he didn't need to know our names. He only needed to know our fear. That was his power. Not violence, not charisma, but precision. A system built on invisible chains wrapped around every part of our lives, tightening with each whisper through the wire. We weren't in the cartel. We were the cartel. Eyes without faces, shadows without voices. Instruments tuned to a single frequency, one that never played music, only orders. And I knew then that even if I found a way out, the map would never let me go. It started with a whisper, not from a radio, not from a commander, from inside me. A whisper that said, "Get out, run, leave before they turn your name into another red dot." I ignored it at first, buried it under routines, radio checks, route logs, checkpoint surveillance. But it grew louder every time I heard a child's voice outside the safe house, every time I smelled blood on someone else's clothes, every time I stared at a hook in a butcher shop and saw a man instead of meat. The breaking point came on a night thick with dust and heat. I was stationed near a trail used by migrants, families mostly. Children with worn shoes, mothers carrying babies in scarves. They were easy to spot, easy to report, easy to condemn. The map didn't care about innocence. Migrantes sin passé were worth more dead than alive. I saw a family young couple, 2 daughters' dusty faces, hope still flickering in their eyes. I had seen hundreds like them. This time I couldn't look away. I approached them under the guise of checking their bags. Whispered, "Turn around. Go back. This road is marked. You'll die here." The father stared at me, unsure if I was warning or threatening. He nodded, turned and vanished into the brush. I hoped I had saved them. I hoped. But hope does not exist in the cartel. Minutes later, my partner reported I had taken too long. The commander called in. I lied, said the bag had a hidden pocket, took time. He didn't question it. Not out loud. But the next morning, one of the lieutenants stared at me too long. He said nothing. He didn't need to. I had been marked, not on the map, in their minds. That was when I began planning my escape. I started pocketing bills from the payments they handed out, folded them into the lining of my shoes, stitched them into the waistband of my pants. It was dangerous. One missing peso, and they would gut you looking for more. I memorized shift changes, radio dead zones, streets with cameras that didn't work. I waited. Weeks. Months. Then one night it happened. A convoy was dispatched to reinforce the border. The house emptied. I volunteered to fetch food. The handler barely looked at me. I walked out with my heart slamming so hard I could barely hear. 2 streets down, I turned the wrong way on purpose and never looked back. I reached a main road, flagged a taxi, gave a random destination. Didn't breathe until we merged into traffic. That was the last time I saw a safe house from the inside. I bounced from town to town, Monterrey, San Luis, Puebla. Changed buses every few hours, slept with shoes on, ate standing up, thought I had made it. I was wrong. The first message came a week later. A neighbor called my mother to say armed men had visited asking questions. She lied, said I had been gone for months. A few days after I got a text. No name, no threats, just one by one. My blood froze. I called my sister. No answer. I knew. They would not kill me. They would erase me through those I loved. My cousin was the first, found in a ditch. A note pinned to his chest for covering a traitor. Then my uncle. Then my mother. Each death delivered like a signature. I never saw their bodies, only the aftermath. Pictures in the news. Messages from anonymous numbers. I had escaped the map, but I had not escaped the price. And I knew then that the red was never meant to mark enemies. It was a warning to those who thought they could leave. I live now with a name that isn't mine. I rent a room where no one asks questions. I sell phone cards at a kiosk in a terminal where buses come and go without memory. To anyone watching, I am just another face. Another body trying to survive in a country built on forgetting. But inside me, the map is still alive. I see it when I close my eyes. Not just the colors green, yellow, red, but the faces tied to them. The butcher swaying on a hook. the little girls crying in the back of a black truck, my mother lying in her own blood because I wanted a radio and a truck with tinted windows. There is no erasing that. Sometimes on crowded streets, I see kids like I once was, 17, angry and visible, chasing respect they don't understand. I want to stop them, shake them, scream that nothing they're chasing is real. That power is a lie whispered through gun barrels and bought with bones. But I say nothing, because I know how that story ends. No one listens until it's too late. You think escaping the cartel makes you free. It doesn't. It makes you a moving target, a shadow of your former self. You learn to whisper in your sleep. You learn to leave no fingerprints. You learn to live like prey, not because they are hunting you every day, but because they only need to catch you once. I tried to warn a family. I failed. I tried to run. They followed. I tried to disappear. They erased those I loved instead. I am alive, yes, but I am not living. I am just a ghost who still speaks in code, who still checks doorways twice, who still flinches at the word Anawak. And yet, if you're hearing this, if somehow my words reach one person before they take that first step toward the darkness, then maybe it meant something. Maybe the deaths weren't entirely for nothing. Maybe one boy won't climb into the back of a truck because someone finally told him where that road ends. They won't tell you the truth when they hand you the radio. They won't say that every word you speak will carry the weight of someone else's life. They won't say that the colors on the map are not strategy, they are hunger. They consume everything, your name, your family, your soul. And they never stop growing. The map isn't just in Tamaulipas. It's everywhere now. It grows in silence. It spreads with obedience. And it survives by making kids believe that fear is the same thing as respect. It isn't. Respect is being able to look your mother in the eyes. Respect is going to bed without blood on your hands. Respect is dying poor, but honest. I learned that too late. I would give everything to hear my mother's voice again. Not because she forgave me, but because she warned me, and I didn't listen. So I leave you this, my confession, my story, my warning. There is no glory in the red map, only silence, blood, and a name no one remembers. And if even one of you turns away from the door before it opens, before the map sees you, before El Huevo learns your voice, then maybe the ghost I've become can finally rest.